Hello to the people of YouTube. So this is a video about what I refer to as the Great AI Panic. Basically, lots of very inflated and panic-ridden claims are made about AI destroying the human species and making people into chutney or whatever, and also taking our gerbs. So this video is about why these claims are not really very sensible. Alright, so let's take care of one objection to the Great AI Panic, which is wrong. Some people claim that AI is impossible, and that's the reason why there's not going to be any problem with AI. The argument goes that computers are just the latest metaphor for everything, because they're the new hotness, the new hot technology. Previously, people would have said, oh, people are just fancy cars or phones or whatever, because those were the new technologies at the time, and it's just another instance of that kind of fad. But that's not true. Thoughts and emotions and all that jazz are abstractions, and people are physical systems that create and use abstractions, including thoughts and emotions. Now, a universal computer is a physical system that can do anything with abstractions that's compatible with the laws of physics, and such a system can be created and can exist. It's not a metaphor. There's an actual argument for this, invented by Alan Turing, David Deutsch, and others. So everything you can think and feel can be done by a computer. So the objection that AI is impossible doesn't really work. Alright, so what is the actual argument? What are one of the actual arguments that AI is a serious problem? The argument goes that an AI has to have the same preferences as us, or it will do things we dislike. An AI could be vastly different from us and have a very different mind, and treating them the same as humans would be like treating a jet as similar to a bird. A bird, like a sparrow, isn't a threat, but if somebody comes along with some fancy military jet and fires missiles at you, then you're kind of done. As such, AIs have to be designed to have the same preferences as us. This argument is made in a video linked in the description, and also in various books. So, as an illustration of the sort of thing that the AI panickers imagine might happen, they say, suppose that a stamp collector builds an AI and he is going to keep it plugged in for a year and he makes it want to collect stamps. The AI is connected to the internet and it has an accurate model of reality, and it predicts the outcome of every packet sequence it could send through the internet. All the information it could send, it knows what will happen. And it outputs a sequence that will optimize stamp collection during that year. And that could lead to really bad outcomes, according to the people who come up with this sort of story. Okay, so most output results in 0 stamps. It's just random gibberish. But You could send out information over the internet that would have the effect of ordering stamps from eBay. You could, in principle, take over stamp factories and make them run non-stop so that they produce loads and loads of stamps and then you collect them. Or, well, we could make all of the printers in the world print stamps, and then you'd have even more stamps than just the stamp factories producing stamps, so the AI might want to do that. And the AI could also notice that people are made out of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, just like stamps, so let's make people in stamps, it might think. This is the argument that's made. So, what should we think of this argument? Well, one issue that arises is this relies on AI minds being qualitatively different in some way from people. Because otherwise we could realize what the AI is doing and stop it. Now, knowledge is created by noticing problems, guessing solutions, and criticizing the guesses until only one is left. And that's the only way knowledge can ever be created. And an AI, or a human, is either able to do this or not. There isn't a third option. There isn't some higher plane of thinking that the AI could actually be on. And if you think knowledge can be created in some other way, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you're going to create knowledge, then you don't know what the outcome is going to be before you start. So the only thing you can do is guess and then criticize the guesses. Any other supposed description relies on you actually knowing what the outcome will be before you start creating the knowledge, which means you're not creating knowledge at all. Now, if you can notice problems, guess solutions, and criticize the guesses, then you can create any possible explanatory knowledge. And that means that AIs and humans can all learn the same explanations. Now you might say, well, maybe, but wouldn't AIs be running on faster hardware with more memory and so on? Well, no. This is not really very relevant because memory and speed aren't the main considerations for whether you create knowledge or not. First of all, you can account for problems with memory and speed using writing, printing, calculators, etc., as people did before computers came along, and now we can get computers to remember and calculate at high speed for us if that's a priority. Now, there is another problem with this idea that the hardware characteristics are the most important thing, which is that humans had the same memory and speed as now for thousands of years and made basically zero progress for a very, very long time. Quality of criticism and guesses makes a difference. Previously, people would make lots of very bad guesses, for example, guesses about gods doing things, and those guesses didn't really make a lot of sense. For example, why should God's preferences just make stuff happen that those preferences have no apparent connection to? And it was a bad explanation for other reasons, like if the laws of physics or whatever are God's commands, then either God is just imposing them out of a whim, in which case you don't really have an explanation, you're just saying something that's equivalent to shit happens. Or God has reasons for setting the laws of physics or whatever to be the way they are, and if there's an independent reason, then it can be realized by something else. For example, if the reason God had picked for designing biological systems the way they are is to make copies of their genes, then that can be realized by evolution. So you don't actually need God as an explanation. Now, if you look at high quality knowledge, like some knowledge of physics, then the guesses tend to be on topic and specific. So Newtonian mechanics, for example, which was very successful for a long time, was about systems and their interactions. Newton's three laws said a body remains at rest or keeps going in a straight line unless it's acted on by a force. The change in motion of a body when it's subjected to a force is proportional to the force and goes in the direction the force acts in. And if body 1 exerts force on body 2, then body 2 exerts an equal and opposite force on body 1. Now, the important thing here isn't the specific laws. It's that the laws are actually about the thing they're supposed to explain. They're actually about bodies and their motion. They're not about whether God likes peanut butter or something like that. Alright, so the view that is commonly given is actually a pre-rational view of AI. Basically, it says that AIs move in mysterious ways, like God. We can't understand what the AI is doing because it's super smart or very different or something like that. Now, it's not exactly unprecedented for one person to have trouble understanding another person. For example, Trump supporters and his detractors have a lot of trouble understanding one another. But in all cases of disagreements, it's possible to make progress as long as both sides are willing to have a critical discussion. If one side decides that it doesn't want to have a critical discussion and to beat up people in the street or whatever, then you're going to have a lot of trouble making progress. If it's impossible to make discussion, if it's impossible to make progress using discussion, then reason, including science, is impotent. And the current view we have of AI is basically that it's impossible to make progress with an AI by having a discussion with it. And that means that, in substance, the AI panic is anti-rational and there's no way you can say it's a scientific theory or a rational theory or anything like that. It's just panic. Now, you might say, well, maybe we can just limit the scope of our understanding of the world. There's some stuff we can understand and some stuff we can't. And AI happens to be the stuff we can't understand. But that's not true. You can't limit the scope of the stuff that it's possible for us to understand, because the stuff outside the scope actually makes the stuff inside the scope incomprehensible, because the incomprehensible stuff interacts with the comprehensible stuff and makes it do stuff you won't be able to understand. For example, if we can't understand AI and it controls stamp printers, then we won't be able to understand the stamp printers because the AI is controlling them. The other curious feature of this thought experiment is that the AI is somehow able to predict the future. But this is not really possible when you're dealing with people. The laws we know of, including physical and biological and epistemological laws, say that prediction of people is not really possible. What you will do in the future depends on what knowledge you will create. We can't know the content of that knowledge because if we knew the content, we would already know that knowledge and we would be trying to create other knowledge. Furthermore, AI can't predict what others will do because it can't predict the growth of its own knowledge. So it can't predict how people will respond to its own unknown future actions. For example, the AI might come across an argument on the internet that changes its mind about the best means of making stamps, and then it would make stamps differently. So it can't predict the future because it might do something different from what it intended to do. Now, the whole thing about AIs making people into stamps is basically about murder. Making a person into a stamp is murder. And the idea that the AI will just commit murder at the drop of a hat and we won't be able to do anything about it except by controlling the AI's preferences tacitly supposes that we can't persuade the AI to act in a civilized manner and not like a thug who goes around murdering people to get stuff. And that means basically that the argument assumes there is no such thing as objective morality. There is no reason you could give to persuade somebody not to commit murder. Now, there are reasons not to murder people, like they can create new explanatory knowledge, and even if your motivation is to make stamps, they can create explanatory knowledge about making stamps better and invent new stamps. So if you want stamps, then you actually want a lot of people around, because people are more useful for making stamps than just the raw material they're composed of. We also have institutions for dealing with murderers, like police, courts, the military, and so on. So this is not exactly an unprecedented problem, and there's no reason to think we can't deal with it. Now, if the AI uses printers without getting the consent of the owners, then it's basically stealing. And again, the argument hinges on saying that it's impossible to persuade the AI not to steal. Now, property rights should be voluntarily transferred through contracts because this allows corrections in how property is being used. A person can refuse to sign a contract, and so he has a veto over the stuff in the contract happening. If he does sign a contract, then property is transferred under the conditions in the contract, and the contract can be overturned if the person was forced to sign, or under certain other circumstances. There will be a link to a book on contract law in the description, so you can understand this a bit better. So, property is transferred under conditions where the parties thought it was a good idea when they were signing, and so they have the option of criticising the way property is being transferred, and that's a good thing. So property rights should be respected. Now, another issue is that lots of people don't really seem to think very hard about this thought experiment because it's a bit weird and disturbing. The stamp collector makes an AI follow his preferences, and then he turns it off after a year. So the AI is forced to do what the stamp collector wants, which makes him basically a slave, and then the stamp collector murders the AI by turning it off. That's kind of disturbing. That makes me more scared of the person making the AI than the AI itself. People are willing to overlook this for the same reason as they worry about all this stuff about AI, and that's largely bad epistemology. And there's an important point here, which is AIs are learning machines. They are creating knowledge, and as such, if you want to make something that creates knowledge, you have to know how knowledge can be created and how it can't be created. So making AIs requires knowing epistemology. Now, learning, creating knowledge, starts with a problem. You learn how to solve a problem, you don't learn a subject per se. Until people acknowledge this and take it seriously, they won't understand epistemology well enough to do AI, or anything else terribly serious. It's not taken seriously in schools or universities where people are expected to learn stuff they're not interested in. Indeed, in the West now, children are forced to go to school. They are sometimes literally dragged kicking and screaming to school. And they're also forced to do other stuff like take baths or eat food that the parent puts down in front of them, even if the child doesn't want the food. And as such, they can't learn good ways to decide when to eat or whether to eat specific food or so on, because they're not really given much choice over doing those things. So they don't have the option of trying out different ideas. Now, the next issue is, will AI make people unemployed and unemployable because AI is better than everything and needs less resources? Well, no. The first issue is comparative advantage. So a person A can be worse than B at everything, and A can still work. B does what he's best at, A does other stuff, A and B can both get more than they would separately as a result. A surgeon might type better than a secretary, but it still benefits him and the secretary for the secretary to do the secretarial work and for the surgeon to do the surgery. Another curious issue is, if the hardware required to run an AI is super cheap, then maybe we could run the unemployed people there too, so they can live super cheaply and don't have to work much. This would require inventing brain scanning technology or something like that. But there is no particular reason to think that it's impossible, so why exactly are people panicking about this? And remember that the experiences that people running in this simulation would have could be made indistinguishable from real life, because computers can simulate anything, any physical system. Now, long-term unemployment happens because people suck at learning. One reason it happens is the government sucks at learning, so they put lots of obstacles in the way of people getting jobs, like licensing and minimum wages. Licensing, of course, makes it more difficult for a person to get a job because he has to get the license before he can get the job, and minimum wages prevent a person from working for less than the minimum wage, even if it would benefit him at the time. Now, in addition to this, many unemployed people suck at learning, and so they don't learn skills that are in demand quickly, and they can't get work because of that. Now, understanding epistemology better will help people learn better, and it's also necessary for AI. So it's entirely possible that these two problems will be solved at the same time, because knowledge required for solving unemployment will be invented before AI comes about, because it's a prerequisite for having AI. I don't know if this will happen, but it's a possibility, and so it's reason not to panic. Now, AIs are just thinking beings, they're not gods, and they basically raise the same problems and opportunities as other people. And that means we can deal with AIs by persuasion, or we can defend ourselves from them. There is no particular reason to think that AIs are going to be a qualitatively different kind of disaster from any other disaster that can be created by human beings. Now, part of the reason why we don't have AI is that we're bad enough at epistemology to try to force people to learn stuff, and AIs need not lead to long-term unemployment, because knowledge of epistemology is required for both AI and good employment prospects for more people. So this is basically the end of the video. You can like it or not, and you can stop worrying about AI basically.